Get the best financial system in the world, make it accessible to people. This is really game-changing technology.
Solana, we're kind of spoiled. We have really fast and quick and low fees.
The default feeling with DeFi, you feel confused, you feel lost, and you're always constantly scared. We want to flip that where you feel safe, you know where you're going, you feel guided. Even if you lose money, you don't feel cheated because you understand. Users couldn't even figure out how to earn basic yield. Why don't we simplify that process first?
All right, what's up everyone? Welcome back to the Next Billion podcast. I'm here today talking to the entrepreneurs, the builders, the people that are making it happen, onboarding the next billion people into crypto. And today I'm joined by Enzo from Hawksight. It's a pleasure to have you on board. I think we met at the Singapore Hacker House was our first time that we met in person, right? And geez, a lot has happened since then. That was maybe like 8 months ago, something like that. Yeah, I think the world blew up in between. So like we had FTX, we had all sorts of different things go on, right? So welcome to the podcast. Great to have you today.
Yeah, super thanks for having me here, George. It was really a pleasure meeting you in Singapore. I think that was like September last year, if I'm not mistaken. A lot has happened since then. I think we saw each other in Breakpoint as well in Lisbon, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, like as we know, after Breakpoint, a lot of stuff has happened, but still really bullish.
Absolutely. So we're going to talk a little bit about DeFi stuff today and some of the really cool things that Hawksight have going on. And Hawksight, I think, is quite involved in the DeFi rabbit hole. You have a lot of different things going on, and I want to see how they're connected together. But firstly, maybe we can just start off with your sort of introduction to crypto. Like what brought you into the crypto world, and was there some sort of problem you're trying to solve? Was there something like that, or was it a hackathon that brought you in? Or yeah, how'd you get started in crypto?
So the part of my background that made it quite intuitive to get into crypto is actually I was always into algorithmic trading. I come from an AI for finance background, doing data science type of stuff. But in my free time, I always do back testing different trading strategies, all sorts of stuff like that. And I was also a huge fan of just open source work. So outside of my regular job before, I would write open source packages or contribute to a bunch of them. And one of them was called Fast Quant. And so basically it would be so complicated to do like back testing on algorithmic trading strategies. And so I wrote this quick wrapper package that would just simplify the whole process from like 60 lines of code to 3 lines of code. And yeah, so basically that was going on. And I was into equities, Forex more of at the time. And then I started getting like pull requests or even feature requests related to, let's get some Bitcoin price feeds into this tool. Let's get some, ETH price feeds on this tool. And I think that was the first signal for me that I kind of already knew about Bitcoin, obviously. Some people would talk about it, but I probably got a bit of exposure into Bitcoin at the time, but not really a lot. But I think when I started getting these early feature requests on Bitcoin, Ethereum price feeds, that's when I started using it.
Is this a few years ago or?
That was 2019.
2019.
Yeah. The Python package was launched early 2019, I believe. And then it started getting some users. And I think in late 2019, that's when I started seeing that pattern, or like in early 2020. And so that's got me dabbled into like the prices. And what I loved about it was with any other data, you either have to pay for it or it's like super late or, markets close. But in crypto, no, it's a 24/7 market. 24/7. And so from a data nerd standpoint, it was just beautiful. So even if I didn't make money right away, like all of a sudden you could relax so many assumptions that you would be forced to have in the rest of Financial Time series data. But then with crypto, you had 24-hour data. So I loved it. And that sort of coincided with me starting my first Binance account and just running some trades using some algorithms that I would be backtesting at the time.
Amazing. And I think that's an underappreciated element of crypto is the fact that it is 24/7 and has been 24/7 for literally over a decade. And you go to a bank and it closes at 5 p.m. and you're like, what? Can I actually send my money? It's literally down. It has downtime. The traditional financial system has downtime for 50% of the actual time in the world. So look, I think it's from a data perspective, very, very exciting. And there's a lot of different price feeds there. So you're getting into it, or you're on the trading side, getting a Binance account set up. Mm-hmm. And how did DeFi come about? Was it when you're delving into a little bit more and learning about these things? Or were you like, wow, okay, Binance is a database and DeFi is it's an actual chain and it's all permissionless and stuff like that? Or how did that come about?
Yeah, I think the DeFi side was much later, actually. I think it was in the early days of COVID. I was doing some trading, not as active anymore, but there was a COVID crash and then all of a sudden this recovery and it's okay. Crypto was all over the news.
March 2020.
Yeah, and you started seeing, I think that was also around the time, correct me if I'm wrong, when a bunch of DeFi tokens were starting to pump alongside the rest of the market.
Yep.
Yeah, and then, I just started hearing about friends who would be talking about, did you know, how much do you make in a bank? Well, I make 10%, I make 15%, or the notorious I make 20% from
a day
Anchor protocol. Yeah, in some a day, right? So I've seen my share of tragedies as well across different chains. But yeah, I think that was like super cool. So it started off as just stories from friends doing DeFi stuff. And then I was just like, oh, I should do that. And I think that was actually the early stages of me. Before that, it would be more like Binance type of stuff. But I suddenly created wallets of like, I had my first MetaMask wallet. And then I realized that the gas fees are expensive. Well, at that time, it was already going up. And then I actually started using Terra blockchain as well. And I think that was actually an aha moment for me. Terra blockchain, we all know like it's a bit lower volume now, at least to say. But then that was actually what onboarded me into DeFi. That's when I realized that, hey, you could actually have not just interest rates that were a lot higher, but it was just more of this idea that you could just move money seamlessly and, just instantly earn interest on it, and it would feel smooth and anyone could do it. And I thought it was just mind-blowing for me.
Yeah.
Like the meme in my head was that if you could get the best financial system in the world and make it accessible to people that have like a tenth of that quality, then this is really game-changing technology. And I think that's what kind of sort of drew me into it as a user at the time. That wasn't me like starting the company yet.
That's awesome. And you know what? People these days, maybe they've forgotten or maybe they give a lot of shit to Terra, but actually it was a really sort of well-designed experience from a user perspective. The wallet was nice. It just worked. You just paid fees that were pretty much nothing, and then you could do stuff. I remember when they had the tokenized stocks on Terra as well, which is pretty good. You could earn like...
doozy.
Yeah, 300% on MSFT or something like that, or Netflix or whatever it is. Hey, that was awesome. And yeah, as you say, like it's a good experience to get people onboarded into DeFi and crypto. It's like, oh, you're using Robinhood on your phone? Like, well, cool, you're buying Microsoft, but you're not earning 300% on it. By the way, over here you can, and it's all free and you don't have to give everyone your ID documents. Yeah, I think that's super cool. So you get into it, and then how did Hawksight come about? Is that sort of discovering Solana, maybe getting involved in the development side, or
so
what happened?
An interesting thing with Hawksight was I decided to join. I think I was finishing like my last job before starting the company, and I was like, well, I feel like I'm ready to start a startup now. And then the open source thing was kind of getting traction, and I was just like, okay, running a company might make sense. And so at that time, I actually got invitation messages from this accelerator in Singapore. And so this is actually where the sort of my Singapore career started more concretely. Is it was called Entrepreneur First, and we joined that. Well, I joined that specifically, and part of the acceleration program is that you meet your co-founder there if you find anyone. And that's actually where I met my co-founder as well. And we met each other, we instantly clicked. And then, we started a company. Initially, it wasn't even crypto. It was like building on top of my open source project at the time. We were like, well, if developers, I think it had like 30,000 developer downloads on Pip at the time. And we were like, well, if developers found this interesting, like what more like regular people? And so we built that. But then long story short, we started creating trading signals out of it. We created trading signals for like anything with OHLCV data, which obviously meant equities, etc., including 24/7 crypto. But then 95% of the usage within those signals was actually within crypto. And so we just followed the users, right? So like we were kind of, I have a feeling we should like double down on this crypto thing. I mean, we were already users at the time. I was already doing DeFi. But I think that was like sort of the insight. Well, it was also DeFi Summer at the time concurrently. And so like that was the insight that was like, okay, let's double down here and start talking to the users within the space. And I think that's where, we just started focusing on that user. We were more focused on like AI trading signals at the time. But we found out much later in the year that users couldn't even figure out how to earn basic yield on their tokens, like the regular person couldn't. And so we decided to, wait, why don't we like simplify that process first? And like the rest is history. We built the first smart contract for Hawksight. We made the Twitter account. I think we met Chase Barker at the time when we were like being nowed in Twitter. And then we became a Solana project basically.
That's awesome. You know what's really cool is hearing everyone's perspectives that we're all around the world doing different things at the same time. And it's really interesting that we all have memories of particularly DeFi Summer, especially in the Solana ecosystem. That's kind of where Solana went from nothing to something very quickly in 2020. And just seeing like the different ways that people were thinking about things at the time. And now we're all in the same boat, so to say. But back then, we all sort of came at it from different areas. So, okay, starting Hawksight and focusing on the DeFi side of things with yields, and particularly that was a big topic during DeFi Summer, was earning a yield on a token. So maybe we should talk a bit about that. So Hawksight right now has a lot of these different vaults. What is a vault? How does it work? And where does the yield come from? Because that's the important thing.
Yeah.
Like, where do these numbers come from? Are they just manufactured out of thin air, or what's the deal?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So basically, maybe just like a brief intro of what Hawksight is now. So Hawksight, as we're building it, is what we believe is the easiest way to earn the highest yield on your cryptocurrency within Solana. And so how the product works is you go in and you see different token categories. So mainly we're focused on Solana and USDC, so just maximizing yield within that. And then when you click within each category, we will be guiding you already on like what are the different strategies that can earn you yield within those core underlying tokens, and how do they rank in terms of APY, and what are the risk profiles that they come with. And so one of the main problems that we're actually trying to solve within DeFi is, well, number one, it was really the fundamental insight really was that it was too complicated. Everything was too complicated. And so any strategy that we have through Hawksight, number one, we guide you on which strategy would earn you the most within a risk profile that you have. But given that you choose a strategy, we also automate the full end-to-end process. So let's say it's like a 5-step, 6-step strategy that requires you to go to 4 different websites. You get an LP token somewhere, you stake it somewhere, and hopefully you don't click on a phishing link in the middle and like get scammed. So basically that whole process, we automate it and we make it safe for users, so that once we tell users, okay, hey, this is like the highest APY strategy for the type of strategy that you want, now in one click, just make a deposit. So that's really the core thing with Hawksight and how we route users to the highest earning yield within a really, really simple process. I think maybe just delving deeper into that UX topic as well. I think UX on one side is like, people always talk about it in terms of number of clicks. Sure, like for us, it's also like number of clicks in a sense because, it's one-click experience, but it's also a feeling. So what we're really trying to emulate here at Hawksight is the default feeling with DeFi right now is that you feel confused, you feel lost, and you're always constantly scared that, you're going to lose money, or if you lose it, you have no idea why, or someone's going to rug you. And so we want to flip that and make the default feeling of Hawksight like the complete opposite, where you feel safe, you feel like you know where you're going, and you feel guided. And even if you lose money, you don't feel cheated because you understand you were informed properly and what that means. And that's a high UX goal, but that's really how we see it. So yeah, that's just like brief thing of the product itself, but I can go into architecture as well.
Yeah,
if you want me to, yeah.
It's kind of a fine line as well, because you can direct people to this is a safe and verified way to do things, but then people that might be a lower yield, right? So there's maybe different risk profiles for different vaults. I mean, how do you think about that? Like, are there different types of risk profiles within Hawksight or different vaults that do different things? And yeah, I guess you're focusing just on Sol and USDC. Like, why is that? Why not the next mega coin that's a total meme and probably going to pump to 1 million and then go back down to 0?
Good question. I think we will have support for those types of tokens very soon. But then the core insight on why we started with Sol and USDC is just if you look at the aggregate TVL within Solana, and it's not just Solana, but other chains as well, you'll see that a huge majority of TVL is denominated in the L1 governance token and the top stablecoin. And in the context of Sol, it's like Sol and USDC. And that's the main reason why we focus there, because our core focus is to how do you get the median user and make a product that's useful for them. But we will start expanding our token offerings over time. With that said, I think on another topic, we call them vaults, but actually our definition of strategy, a DeFi strategy, is essentially a series of DeFi steps. It's kind of like, right, you can see DeFi as sort of this composability graph, right, where you can have, if something's tokenized, then you can stack it on another thing, stack on another thing. And so very quickly you have sort of this graph and with a lot of nodes. And then essentially
building blocks kind of thing.
Exactly. So you have these building blocks, you can see them as nodes. So if you see a node as for example, okay, on one node there's a swap step, there's a marinade step where it turns into marinade Sol, then you can actually lend that out somewhere, you can use it as collateral. And so what we define a strategy as is any line segment that is drawn out, i.e. any series of steps in a specified sequence, that is a strategy. And any line segment within that network has a return, risk and reward profile. And so what we're trying to do is essentially have different segments or different strategies, any arbitrary strategy, and uncover the best strategy for a user. That's where analytics is really a big part of what we do. And number one, right, with Step, you guys are experts at this as well, having the proper indexing set up so that not only do we have current APY, but APY over time, even projected kinds of APYs, so that this type of data and these types of projections can be used to drive, really informed and optimized decisions for users.
Yeah. And who are these users? What's the profile? Is it people say it might be DeFi degens, but what does that mean? Is that someone that's, got $100 to put in a vault, or $1,000 or 10,000, or is it, people that are very crypto savvy, that are maybe, already very technically savvy, or is it people that are totally not and have no idea and just sort of wandered into Discord one day? What's your impression on the types of people that are interested in these sorts of products?
Yeah, I mean, we hugely obsess over anyone who's using our platform. So the pattern that we definitely see, there are different types of users. But interestingly, a lot of the active users the first ones are people you would expect. So they're people who are already DeFi native, like you see from their transaction history that, oh, these were users of, let's say, people basically providing liquidity on Orca, on Radium, on Saber even, and they would do it manually. And they're basically already familiar with the process. So one cohort of users we have are people who already do strategies manually, and they do their own research and their own optimization themselves. And interestingly, like for this type of user profile, we used to do a lot of user interviews and find that a lot of them initially would say that, hey, I wouldn't use Hawksight because I don't need to automate this. Like I already do it myself, and it's an additional abstraction layer. But then for the few that we convince to use it consistently, we actually find that they stay. So that type of user profile is quite interesting and quite intuitive.
Just quickly there, maybe one of the differences between Solana and Ethereum is that people were maybe more reluctant to use like another abstraction on Solana versus say Ethereum where the fees are so high. Because on Ethereum, if you're doing 4 steps, you're paying a lot in fees every single time you're doing it just for your bag of money. But if you're actually sharing that between a much larger pool on Ethereum, then your individual fees per transaction to do those steps is like down 100x. So that's maybe why a lot of those pooling initiatives get a lot of traction on Ethereum. It's just because it's really expensive. Whereas Solana, we're kind of spoiled. We have really, really fast and quick and low fees.
Yes, exactly. And actually that boils down into like how we implement everything from an architecture standpoint as well. So the meta in a blockchain like Ethereum is that if users want to, let's say, earn yield on X strategy, whether it's via yearn or something else, the meta is for everyone to deposit their money into like one contract in their case, and that contract stores all of the tokens, and then there's some minting involved so that people know their commensurate share. But basically everyone pulls their funds into one place, and that one place is the one executing a series of steps. And that makes sense in a high gas fee environment like Ethereum because it's a fixed cost and then you have to divide it by the number of people in the pool. That's also why you need a minimum number of users, so it's worth it. But with Hawksight, we actually flipped this architecture upside down whereby instead of having like one vault, and that's why I hesitate to call it a vault, instead of having one vault, each user that uses Hawksight actually has a separate user wallet that they have full control over.
And that's cool.
Exactly. So we actually flipped the centralized vault. We call it the centralized vault approach because that's kind of what it is. We flip that. We don't make it a centralized vault. We make it user wallet architecture. And so if, let's say right now we have 200 active wallets right now currently, each one of them has a user wallet. And so what that means actually is that when a strategy is executed, we describe it as non-custodial because each step they themselves authorize as opposed to, trust me, bro, this vault, I'm going to do what you think it's going to do. Yeah. So we really designed it to be like a really trustless asset management experience.
This is awesome. So, okay, but if the strategy changes, do they have to go and set up a new contract or move the money from contract A to contract B or something like that if there's a change? Or I guess like when you sign up to a particular vault, you're signing up to like strategy X and that's it. And it's like, okay, if the yield is not there in 2 months' time and you want to move to something else, well, cool. You just sort of extract your funds and then make a new contract, right? Is that how it works? Or yeah, how do people, I guess, move funds from one strategy to another?
Good question. So we have multiple approaches. Like the first approach is more of the softer one where, we have the analytics that we're indexing across these different strategies. And so we're in the process of using that data to actually give recommendations to users. So for example, case in point, let's say the FTX crash is happening right now. And, if you're following DeFi, like the first types of protocols that were hugely affected in that time were actually borrow lending protocols where utilizations were going above 90% and eventually 100. And so people start getting funds locked, right? So that's an example of a situation where our models would have already noticed utilization going above like 50, 60, 70. And so if a user got a notification at the time, hey, you should switch from this to this. And then if you click that button, brings you straight to the page and brings you to the wallet confirmation. So that's basically smart alerts that's driven by the analytics engine underlying Hawksight. But another approach that we're hugely excited about as well is integrating decentralized automation into strategy switching. So imagine if a user can set up within their own authority, like, let's say someone uses strategy A. We will have a feature where a user can define rules whereby strategy A switches to strategy D. Of course, the user can have like an advanced toggle where they set it themselves, but because we have the data, we can also sort of recommend to the user, hey, this makes sense because ABC, authorize it. So that's kind of how we see that type of approach. And the cool thing is that, and I'm kind of shilling here, but this is where tools like Clockwork are super, super interesting because they get these automations that were previously required centralized cranking systems, and then they decentralize it in such a way that, you inherit the decentralization properties of the validator network itself. So that's pretty cool.
This is amazing. So I did not know this, and I think everyone should know this, and how this model is fundamentally different to some of the Ethereum models that are like, oh, we put a lot of money in the same contract. And as you say, trust me, bro, I might have keys. And then they go, oh, yeah, but we're a DAO and blah, blah, blah. It's like, cool, okay. Nothing's ever been hacked that's ever been in a DAO or something. So yeah, this is really cool. And I guess this is an example of something that you can't really do elsewhere just because
you cannot. You cannot do this in Ethereum. Even in Polygon, it would be hugely difficult.
Yeah. Amazing. Very cool. So you mentioned there about some of the insights and some of the analytics and some of the notifications and signals. I noticed Hawksight, when I go to Hawksight, you guys have a lot of other stuff going on there with like chatbot stuff and social stuff. So is that the next progression from vaults and strategies and these sorts of things? Is it maybe intelligence and data intelligence around that, which includes the social, it includes maybe the actual performance indicators and stuff like that? How are you thinking about that? And what are these other sort of products related to Hawksight?
Yeah, it's a good question. So actually, when we decided to go into DeFi, it was kind of like an awkward situation where we had an existing trading signals product. So literally, if you go to trading.hawksight.co, you'll see this website where you have a bunch of like crypto tokens with like buy, sell signals, and you can actually subscribe to them. The website's still up now. And so basically, like we had this whole analytic system that allowed us to do trading signals in that kind of way. And so while we were all doing the whole DeFi thing, well, the system was set up quite scalably. So the only cost is like the AWS thing, and like we were using AWS credits anyway. And so keep letting it run. It still has users up to now. So I think initially it was that. We were just like, oh, let's maintain it. Over time, it kind of evolved because the signals themselves were interfaced to users through like chatbots. That's actually where we saw more traction, because not just during DeFi summer, but for a while, like, okay, NFTs, DeFi stuff. A lot of these communities live in Telegram and Discord, as you guys know. Well, we have a bot, and then now it's, I think, more than 600 Discord servers. Yeah. Like we have these bots in like more than 600 Discord servers and like a few hundred like Telegram groups. I think it's combined as well. But yeah, like we started seeing usage there. And so at the current state, actually, like we still see that there. Obviously, it's slowed down because of the markets. But these are like opportunities that we kind of maintained just because we think there's a way that we can either funnel them into our core app, because from an analytics standpoint, it does make sense that they feed into each other. Yeah. Either that, or like we have a new page that we're actually working on, which is the user dashboard. So basically in this user dashboard, this could be the place where, in addition to like stuff that we already have, like APY charts and stuff like that, maybe we can have widgets that show people when to trade and all those sorts of things.
It's a customer acquisition play as well. Like if you're in 600 different channels and Discords, that's 600 channels and Discords, which potentially could be like on-ramps and funnels to your product.
Exactly. That's how we see it. And that's the narrative that got us to think, okay, we could actually do that. And we do have some validation that they can convert back to the website, but like it takes a lot of experimentation.
Very cool. Okay, so, and also I see that there's like insurance and a couple of other initiatives as well that you guys are doing. What are you working on this year, or what's the sort of goal this year in the DeFi world to get to for you guys?
Yeah, the main focus really now is the core DeFi product. So a lot of the different analytics tools were sort of experiments to see if we could get users and if they could be used to drive user acquisition. You mentioned the social signals as well, that got some traction. But I think this year, especially with the slowdown of the market, I think this is a perfect time to just like focus for us. So, have these like widespread things, not necessarily sunset them because they do have users, but kind of like in terms of development effort, focus on like really the core DeFi app. And really right now we're obsessing over two things. It's that feeling I was explaining earlier. How do we make people feel like they know what they're doing in DeFi through data, through all these things, through good UX? And in addition to that, how do we make people more money? I think that's where it gets more like, quantitative finance type of work for us, which is like a good balance as well. We have some creative UX kind of initiatives happening, but at the same time, like I'm working with my quant and we're just whiteboarding remotely on like, okay, how can this yield actually go up? Whether it's through auto compounding stuff that we have upcoming, through like rebalancing type of features, and how to execute them in a way that stays true to the non-custodial asset management experience that we're able to do through our architecture.
Yeah. And what do you see for maybe the future of DeFi this year? Like I always ask this to DeFi people because obviously bear market, giga-wrecked DeFi all over across the board pretty hard. But we've recovered a little bit, certainly since the FTX nonsense and all that sort of stuff. And I guess I saw today we had a new central limit order books go, the Phoenix one, and we've got Open Book and we've got, Drift and Zeta and a bunch of other people that have order books now. And we still got, some of the classics like Radium and Orca that are doing really well. So where are we headed to here? are there new products which we haven't seen before, or are they maybe refinements on the existing ones, or what do you want to see? Maybe for the strategies as well, or is there anything in particular that's missing from the DeFi world that hasn't appeared yet?
Yeah, so I think there are a lot of trends that excite me that I think are simultaneously predictions, but also like what I want to happen. So I think on the data side, I'm a bit biased because I come from a data background. So on the data side, for example, the Solana is the best place to work at as a data scientist. I mean, blockchain in general, right? Because the data is open source, anyone can query it. But the really bad part of the data experience is ingesting data and reshaping it. Basically, it's a really ugly JSON file. So nobody wants to do the hard data engineering work. Well, at least before, no one wanted to do the hard data engineering work. But up until recently, I think last year is when we started seeing a bunch of solutions that took on that hard job and basically create primitives that developers can build on top of. So you got Helios, you got Flipside, you got the different block explorers like Solana FM, Solscan. I saw you guys have like this new version 2 of your transaction.
Analytics.step.finance. Everyone go and check it out.
Yeah, Step Finance. Yeah. So like I really look up to you guys as well from an analytics front. So I see a lot of the data infra work is already at a state where it's usable for application level data work. And so I think 2023 is the year of data applications. So data applications meaning downstream tasks that include, more advanced like dashboards that guide, these DeFi user journeys, these NFT user journeys. I think it also ties into the rising popularity of pro trading. Like, why is pro trading a thing using on-chain data? Well, it's because the data pipelines are now here. And that's how we have real-time charts and all that data application stuff. I think more AI use cases as well. I think we're seeing more unicorns actually happening from the B2B end as well. Coming from Ethereum, I think we're yet to see that on Solana as well. More AI applications, ChatGPT is coming out. I don't know exactly how that's be applied here, but I think that's something. But yeah, I'm pretty excited to see like, okay, what can you actually do? Can you predict when a borrow lending protocols, predictive analytics around certain metrics that matter, risk metrics, all that kind of stuff. So I think that is a place where I think the data space is really going to upgrade and we're going to see a lot more AI stuff. So that's super exciting. And by the way, like with Hawksight, that's the way we see ourselves writing as well. The intention was always seeing Web3 right now, we describe it as sort of being in a Craigslist kind of situation. When the internet had Craigslist and everything was in one place, the builders of that era thought that solved the problem. But now their market share is nothing compared to Amazon because Amazon has this amazing recommendation layer that makes everything seamless. And we do believe that can be us from a DeFi front. So yeah, recommendation systems and all that kind of stuff. Imagine like embedding vectors at the wallet level. Imagine that as a business model as well that you can sell. There's so many things. So yeah, that's on the data front. And I think on the DeFi front, a lot of the core primitives were already made. We will probably see a lot of new borrow lending primitives go up. And maybe like one trend I do notice that I think is quite bullish is that we're starting to see a lot more sources of real yield as opposed to emission-based yield. And a lot of these real yield sources being tokenized, whether it's like Jito Sol, right? Whether it's like, I think Amulet has now a tokenized way to earn premiums as well.
I think the option vaults kicked off a lot of that. Actually, the yield comes from real risk taking. And it's not just, a once and done, here's a 1,000,000% APY, see you later. And, you're going to be hit with an impermanent loss on the other side, most likely. But yeah, I think a lot of the real yield things are super important. I love to hear the data focus. I think that is great. And you're right, like probably recommendations, probably making people aware, because I think that's a problem that we have in DeFi is only like 0.5% or some tiny number of the total crypto users. Most people are on exchanges. And I tweeted out the other day, I'm like, people got wrecked by a regulated centralized exchange and they still haven't understood DeFi. It's like, what are you doing? So I think there's maybe some work from all DeFi protocols, all of us, to onboard those people and inform and educate. And I think tools like Hawksight do that essentially, where it's like, hey, did you know that these kind of opportunities are out there? And by the way, we take care of it all for you. And here's how it's decentralized and non-custodial and all that sort of stuff. So I really like that. I think that's a great way to go about things. Okay, so focus on like most of the primitives. Would you say that maybe the primitives are getting more mature in the Solana side of things? Like we had so many lenders, but I think a lot of them have sort of disappeared. And then we have Sharky now with the P2P loans with the NFTs. So there's no pool, which is the big risk. Do you think that we might see some maturity in some of these? We're now seeing the evolution of a central limit order book DEX without a crank as well. So moving on from Serum days, is there maybe some evolution to happen in DeFi as well?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a lot. And I'm glad you mentioned NFTs because that's actually where we're getting a lot of insights around. Well, a lot of our users, first of all, like something unique about them is that a lot of them are like NFT people who made their money last year. And then now they have, it's like, how are we going to increase the DeFi pie? You asked the question. Yeah. Well, if let's say, okay, 0.5% is DeFi user, maybe like a third are NFT users. Well, if those guys have money now, how do you then onboard them into DeFi? And you'll be surprised where, we talk to a lot of people. There's this false dichotomy of NFTs and DeFi. NFTs are financialized. Think about it. It's a tradable asset.
Yeah, they're learning and they're like cross-pollinating now as well. They're getting into lending. They're lending their JPEGs.
Exactly.
It's great.
Exactly. Now you have players like Sharky, like Fract. And I think that's super important because the financialization of NFT kind of trend right now, that's what's onboarding within, not just within Solana, I think across chains, right? I think that's one way that it's going to happen. And you'll be surprised, even when you talk to people about their emotions. We've, for example, found that if you're an NFT trader, you naturally trust an NFT-backed loan because you understand what NFTs are. Like, it's not even about, don't show me some VAR, like value at risk chart. Yeah. Nobody's going to look at that. But then when they hear, well, it's NFT backed and I am an NFT trader, I identify with that.
It's got a picture of a monkey back in it.
Exactly. That's so intuitive. Like, you're telling me a monkey is like collateralizing that loan. Okay, now I can lend to it.
Oh, now it's legit.
Yeah, exactly. That's legit because I own like 10 of those or something. So that's awesome. Pretty interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, that's super cool. And I think definitely reaching out to the NFT world, building solutions for them. And another cool thing is NFTs are denominated in Sol, the native L1 token. Mm-hmm. And in the Ethereum land, they're denominated in ETH. And that's a quantum shift to how we think about a lot of things. In the DeFi world, everything's kind of referenced to USD still, whereas NFT people think in terms of Sol. So having Sol native staking solutions, it's really cool because custodial risks are very low. You can just get exposure to via, validator staking or something like that if you want. So yeah, there's a lot of really cool ways that are pretty low risk for these NFT people to get involved. Speaking about getting involved, how do people find out more about Hawksight? Where do we go? Discords, blogs, websites? Where can they find you?
Yeah, so just go to hawksight.co. That's our main website. You should be guided from the homepage. And then for socials, we mainly use Twitter. So just search Hawksight, you'll see it. And then we have a Discord as well. And everything should be on the link tree linked on our Twitter page.
Love it. Excellent. Well, definitely go and check out Hawksight. These guys have been doing really good things for the DeFi ecosystem, pretty much simplifying a lot of very complex things which go on behind the scenes and everything. I really like that whole concept of the money's not in one contract. It's actually everyone makes their own contract. Yeah. I don't know if anyone's done that. Like, I think that's amazing. So definitely go check it out. Look, Enzo, it's been a pleasure having you on the podcast today. Thank you very much for coming, and we'll have to chat again soon.
It was my pleasure, George. Thanks so much for having me.
Cheers. See ya.
Cheers.